All right, welcome back live to the weekly roundup. We've been having some fun with our tech today as we go live instead of posting recorded. So thank you everybody for your patience there. I'm Dylan. That's Jen. That's Mike. That's Mel. We are the PSN coaches. We all run our own businesses in real estate as well on real estate teams. And Jen now being a part at the brokerage level. So it's been a fun year for all of us as our businesses have grown, changed, different roles, new challenges. And it brought up the topic today of, and this is a long standing topic in the real estate world, is are you approaching your real estate career as a job or as a business? I think it's something that Keller Williams has done a great job of bringing up as a part of something that you need to decide pretty early on in terms of educating realtors that that's a way to look at it. And so, Jen, I want to start off with you as somebody that's done a lot of coaching with agents and is now recruiting and working with new agents, helping them get established in their careers. First, when did this change for you? Why don't we go all the way back? And when did it change for you when you realized that you were building a business in your career as opposed to having a job?
Oh man, you're taking me way back. For me, I think the realization kicked in when I started building my own team. So before that, I had a partnership, I was on a team, I did deals, I nurtured my clients, I made good money, and I went home and I hung out with my friends and my family, and that was normal, right? I didn't think about being a business owner, partially because it wasn't just mine, and then partially because I don't know, I just didn't understand that side of it. I just saw it as my job was to do deals and get checks, and that's what I did for a long time. And then when I kind of stepped out on my own and then kind of partnered up and started building a real estate team, and I had admins to pay and I had agents to take care of, and you had to be accountable to them and they had to be accountable to you. All of a sudden, the math started to matter more, right? The conversation of what we were spending, what was coming in, where the money was coming from, all of that started to change. And that was probably when I first started to realize that I needed to spend time on the business owner education piece, not just the part about being a great realtor. I spent most of my time in that space up until then, I'd say.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I think there is something about once you start getting into budgeting and reoccurring payments that are steady as opposed to like, yeah, I'm paying for a virtual tour here and some staging here and some marketing there, but it's not systematized. Once you start systematizing that stuff and you're committed to a budget and you're committed to an outlaying of expenses, you're like, okay, now it's really kicking in. Like I've been hearing people talk about this. I've done business planning. I understand the importance of that stuff. But then once you
Yeah.
start really laying it out, you're like, oh, now I truly understand the
Yeah.
importance of that. And Mel, I see you nodding your head there, and I know you guys have been working on some really cool stuff on your team even today with a meeting that you took. So tell me, when did it click in for you, that change between I've got a job versus a business?
Way too late. Way too late. Let's be
I love that.
brutally honest here.
Yeah, and I think that's the reality for a lot of people. And I think there's somebody someplace right now where that light bulb just clicked in above their head or that glass shatters, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, it's hitting me now."
I'll tell
Yeah.
you, we just had, I can't find it right now, but we had a meeting with a chief financial officer who offers it on a fractional basis, right? Comes in and does an assessment on your company. So if I do go off screen and cry, I apologize, but this is what I'm dealing with. And the thing of it is it was interesting because he brought in a example from a book, right? But I thought it was an example of what a result of what we did on our team. And it was, but it wasn't from our data. He said, this is what, most business people, how they grow and how they invest in their business in anticipation of things as opposed to, going profit first. Like this is
Mhm.
in anticipation. And then right when you were at that peak, when everything's going well, you invested all that money, bam, something happened, right? And so it was very interesting that it was not a display of from my data, but it was exactly
Mhm.
what we had done over that period. And it
Mhm.
lights the light, right? So from that, I learned like quite often, and with so many places you look at businesses and investing, I'm sure Jen, you can say the same, is
Yeah.
we being overly optimistic is just, or if not more damaging than, being overly pessimistic. Like in this, we're talking about the shift book, right? And tactic 2. And one of the things I love that they say is, Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner in the book Warren Buffett Speaks, said, name a business that has been ruined by downsizing. I can't name one. Name a company that's been ruined by bloat. I can name dozens,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's again realizing that, my God, these are fixed expenses, whether they're wages or office space or services. These are fixed expenses that don't go up and down, with the business. And one of the things he said is, we love when we see people's wages and certain things tied to the income, the revenue of the company, as opposed to flat across the board. So this was all great news had I, really paid attention prior to building it. So then you're left with one of two options, right? And as much for me, of course, because I'm an overly optimistic person, mine is going to be like going at that revenue to correct the tide. But
Mm-hmm.
realistically, and the majority of the time, that isn't the solution, right? That's a wish and a dream.
Right.
And the solution ends up reality. Like, watch your expenses. I love when they say, to generate revenue, you generate leads, but to make a profit, you manage expenses.
Hmm.
And there's no getting around that. That
Yeah.
is what it is, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, we've talked about this, you and I, a bunch of times as we've gone to trainings together, and there's somebody up there that's talking, and they're like, yeah, I was making $1 million GCI a year, but I wasn't running a profit. And we're like,
I was just
how did
thinking
you
about that.
manage that, right?
I was just thinking about that.
And-
Like, I remember we were at a training together, and there was a guy up there, and he made over $1 million in revenue. And he goes, and we haven't been profitable for 9 months. And I was like, what? Like, I'm sorry, did nobody hear that? Like, and I looked around the room, and I locked eyes with Dylan, and I kind of gave him like the WTF look of like, how is that possible? And why is he bragging about that? Like, that's not something you brag about. Right?
Maybe it was a confessional, Mike, like I'm having right now.
No,
Okay.
honestly,
Yeah.
like so kind of jumping onto what you said there, Mel, in terms of like the idea of it and how important it is exactly what he was going through. It's like this idea that he's been putting so much time and energy into it, making that big revenue number, but not realizing the expenses of catching that revenue has been rising as well. And that's something he has to reflect on as well. But also one part of this that is a part that I understood after the fact, when I really sat down and thought about that, is there are certain businesses that are a little bit better with how they handle their taxes. So for example, they might make capital investments in order to show no profit, right? So if he bought a brand new car to bring down his income to the point where it shows nothing, so he doesn't pay any taxes, well, he made a capital investment that, yes, okay, he doesn't pay the money to the government, but essentially he's still getting something out of it. I don't know if that's kind of confusing anybody, but that was something that I started thinking about and went, oh, okay, so it depends on how he's running his business, right? But I know for myself, like, expenses are everything for me. Like, I'm a numbers freak. I love to sit in my numbers. I am the first guy that will cut a service. And when I did my taxes last year, I switched accountants. So I switched over to an accountant that's very familiar at our office. So he does about 30 realtors. And when I went in to pay my bill, he said, out of all the realtors I do, you have the highest margin of profit. And I was like, wicked. And he's like, no, you idiot. Like, yeah, that's great. Like, that's really good. But at the same time, you're also leaving too much money on the table that you could be investing in your business. And I was like, okay, all right. I guess that is a concern. And it's true. It is true. But again, with that risk of investing more money comes higher expenses, right? So you really, whatever it is you're investing in has to pay off or has to have an ROI, right? And I'm very big like that. One of the first coaching lessons I took with Jen, we sat down. I remember it, like, to this day, because I still do it, even though she told me not to do it. I still do it. Sat down, and she's like, okay, so we kind of talked about money, and she said, you have a lump sum of money set aside for what? And I was like, well, that's in case I never do a deal. Like, it's like if I never do a deal, I can run my business for 1 year straight. And she's like, is that gonna happen to you? And I was like, no, but like, what if? She's like, there's not a what if. It's never happened to you. So why would it happen? Why are you having this fear around having this money set aside to protect yourself against something that's not going to happen because you're just going to go out there and do a deal? And I was like, it's a good point. It's a really good point, because I was coming from like a state of fear around future business, right? But it's never been an issue for me. So it's,
I gotta qualify that a little bit too. I'm fully for people having a cushion of money that if they don't do deals for 3 months or 4 months or whatever, that they
year's a
can
bit
run
crazy.
their business. Fully support that decision. A year, and it wasn't even like a small amount. It was a significant amount for a year's worth of like income. Basically, it was like probably overkill on the like safety net. You know what I mean? Like put some of that money back into your business. Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
exactly what you said. Is you got to take some of that
don't
money
people
and you
think
got to
we're
start
saying-
investing it into your business, right? Because again, that money's now sitting there. Yeah, it's invested, but it's not doing you any good because it's not getting you a higher return.
It's not growing your
so
business.
it's something when it comes to expense management, and I could talk about this. It's one of my favorite topics because personally, I think I'm really good at it, and by doing that, I'm very proactive with it. So like every single time that I'm thinking that I'm losing value somewhere, I go out and I cut it. And it's just one of the things that I do. And I review my P&L. I don't know if you guys review your P&L, but I review mine monthly, and I seriously look at it and what did we spend? What did we make? Where could we have cut if we could have, right? I went into just walking down the stores. I was in the mall, walked into the Bell store. I said to the guy, listen, I'm paying X at TELUS. Today, if you sign me at, Y, I'll work with you. He said, no problem. We got it done. I saved $10. Okay, what's $10, right? It's nothing. To me, I was like, bonus. I just got an extra $10 a month, right? And who knows where that's going to go. But that's the way. It's like I'm super frugal in the way that I look at my money. So I'm very cautious. I'm very proactive with it. And I just don't want to be stuck in a situation where I go, holy shit moment where you're like, oh my gosh, I got to make some severe changes. Yeah. Is it too much? Probably.
I think what's good to evaluate there is we talk about it, you and Mel are almost like the good bookends to the scale of how you could look at it, right? Mel's talking about a lot of looking at it, approaching with, yeah, exactly. Approaching with like optimism and maybe overspending in that sense for the value that you're going to inject into your business. And then Mike, if we were being honest, I think that extra cushion that's sitting there is probably like opportunity lost. Like the cost of that is lost opportunity, right? So
100%.
Both people would need to find that middle ground. And I think that's what everybody is struggling to do, is adjusting your dials so that you're in the sweet spot of your expenses versus investing in your business, right? And obviously the cushion is another discussion, right?
Yep. That's exactly it. Because again, expenses can get out of hand really quickly, but you have to follow. And that's why, I love a couple different models out there that talk about, there's profit share models and there's revenue share models. And the revenue share models kind of scare me. And I'll tell you why. It's because revenue doesn't always necessarily mean profit, right? So revenue, I can make $1 million, but if I spent 1.2 to make it, well, I walked away with negative 200,000, right?
Yep.
And so when you have a revenue share model, that can be a problem down the road if your company's not, profitable. I guarantee you the first thing that they're going to take away is that kind of stuff, right? So, and again, that's just at a brokerage level, but when you break it down to your business, it's the same thing, right? We can be focused on revenue, but that doesn't matter. What matters is the net. What matters is the same thing we tell our homeowners, right? What matters is your net. And if I'm netting you more money, that's the reason why you should work with me, right? Same thing with our business. If you're netting a higher amount, it's going to be better. I would rather, do 5 deals a year and net $100,000 a year than do 100 deals and, have $1 million in revenue and only net 100,000. You know what I mean? Like it's just so much additional work for something that's similar.
And opportunity for loss as well, because your expenses are so high at that point that any wrong move could turn you the other direction. Mel, what were you thinking as Mike was talking there?
I just wanted to, because I'm conscious of who's listening to us, right? Like who's hearing us. And I find that we've talked about this before. And actually Colin, our what is he? OP?
Operating
principal. Really great video that people reached out to me. Agents in our brokerage reached out to me and said, you know what, if you're talking to Colin, tell him that that was amazing. Like, I really appreciated that. And it was encouraging agents, like, you're not alone, because what happens is, unless you're like me and you just like spill your guts everywhere, you keep it, right? Because you feel like embarrassed or shameful or whatever. Me, I got no shame. But anyway, but that is what happens, right? You keep it to yourself because you're sure you're the only one going through this. And I know that, like I said, I had agents reach out and said they really appreciated Colin's message. And he was out there saying, you have something, don't feel these negative feelings, reach out,
Yeah.
privately. And I think we're blessed to have someone like that, leading our brokerage, to actually offer that up, because you do not need to be silent. And judgment, unless you're hanging around these three, will not happen. I tease. But
Yeah.
no,
But it is so
honestly.
true, Mel. That's exactly it. Like it's one of those things that you're not going through. If you're struggling, you're not alone. Number one, but number two, go out there and talk about it, because the more you talk about it, the more likely it is you're going to find a solution, right?
Yes.
Like there there's tons of situations in my past that I've helped friends with their finances. I've helped my parents with their like just always different situations that require different sets of eyes to look at it, right? And just like you said, you had that consultant come in and they reviewed it and they say, here's where we can make some changes, right? And that's number one spot you can say, okay, this is what we got to do, right? Now you have identified the area that you need to fix, right? Now you just got to go out there and fix it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think the only way you get to that point is by doing the work of sitting down and actually tracking everything. And I know, like, from coaching and conversations with agents in general, most agents don't do that part. They don't even know what their picture is. They kind of like, I'll ask somebody, what's your input, what's your output, what's the cost of your sale, even, which is, like your listing costs for marketing and staging and all that sort of stuff. Like, what does it cost you per listing? Majority of agents, like 90%, can't tell me what that number is. They don't know. And they don't know because they're doing math in their head, right? And we've probably all, maybe with the exception of Mike, but the rest of us have probably all been guilty about this at some point, where we're like, well, I'm going to make like 20K on that commission. So if I do this 1,500, like, that's really not a big deal. And the clients will really like that. So that's good. And then a week later, you're like, oh yeah, like, it'd be really cool if we did this. And then you spend that 1,500 or 500. And then you're eating into your margin every time because you don't know what your margin is. And the first step every agent should take is either hire a bookkeeper. So hire someone to track your numbers and give them your money, every month, your money, your in and your out, right? What you made and what you spent, and have them track it for you, because this shouldn't be an option. It's part of being a business owner, right? And if you want to own a business, you need to, first of all, and in the shift tactic of the one that we're talking about, it's like, the whole thing is understanding your revenue model, because, as Mike said to you, revenue doesn't necessarily mean profit, but when you understand your revenue model, you know where profit starts, and you can build goals around that, knowing, okay, X amount of money goes towards running my business, and then X amount of money is my taxes, whatnot, and then X amount is profit. Now I can build a plan around that. If I'm just kind of throwing it out there and going, well, let's hope it works out, or yeah, that math makes sense in my head, I am, one, I'm not in control of my income whatsoever, and two, I'm not in control of the flow of my business or even the story of my business, right? I can't see when I make a mistake because I'm not tracking it. I can't see when I do something really well because I'm not tracking it, right? And I think agents don't do that enough, because, again, we're not taught to be business owners. We're taught to be transactional realtors. And so unless someone sits you down and tells you, hey, you need to do this, or you get a mentor that guides you, or you hear it and it crosses your mind, you're probably not going to know to do it, right? Unfortunately, it's not a part of our training that we all receive. Which,
Jen, I operated for 9 years as a capping agent, okay, which I thought I had no idea what I was, until I started coaching with you, and you're asking me those questions, and I'm like, well, how the hell am I supposed to know? I don't know those things. I just know that I'm getting them done. It is not done. And now when I'm coaching, agree with your numbers, like 9 to 9.5 out of 10 have zero idea.
they don't
Zero.
know. They don't
Yeah.
know. And if you ask them to track it, they will pretty much collapse in front of you as if you have asked them to do the worst thing in the entire world, because it's a highly, highly administrative task. And most people in our industry are not strong administratively. They're strong
Yeah.
with people, they're strong with negotiations, relationships, marketing, all of that. But admin is not a job that people get into as with a strength. When you want to be a realtor, you're usually not good at admin, right? So you need somebody to do that for you, whether it's a bookkeeper or it's, your accountant if they do it, or you sit down and you force yourself to do it once a month, whatever that looks like. Your business will be so much better for it, because you
Oh
might,
yeah.
what most people don't realize right now is that you might have, and Mike, we actually had this conversation a few weeks ago. We did the math on your database, and
Always the punchline. I'm telling you.
I
I know.
swear.
Sorry, Mike. I know.
Yeah.
Mel, we did this too, but I've coached with Mike recently than Mel, so it's more top of mind. But um, we looked at your existing database and the amount of leads and the amount of contacts you had in your database, and then we said, like, well, what would be a crazy goal for you to hit, right? Like, what would be this ridiculous number? And then we did the math on it, and he actually had enough people in his database without lead generating for another day, in his database to generate him that much ROI, right?
Yep.
But I mean, obviously, you got to continue to add to your database. I get that.
Yep.
Sorry, did you cut out? Did oh
Yeah,
no,
you're cutting
You
out.
said
You
it.
did cut
that
out.
was a terrible. That was a terrible freeze frame
It
too. Oh
was.
no,
It
You
was.
yeah, that
There.
was not.
you
Yeah,
just
That's okay,
finished
but
at
no,
the
sorry,
point
but
where
totally
Mike
agree
has
with what you're
enough people
saying.
in his database to maintain
Yeah.
his goals through
yeah,
database referrals
So
and working the database.
without even having to spend extra money, there's enough that I already have in my database that I could go in, dive into, and generate income from without having to go out there. Like, we invest in
right.
Agent Locator, we pay a monthly fee to them. And before I even paid for that, I called the girls and I sat down with them, I had a meeting with them, and I said, okay, if I pay you X amount per year, what is my return going to be per year? Because if the day comes that there's no return, you're out, right? And she's like, no, that's fair. Very logical answer. Like the average agent, and we worked through the numbers, and I made the educated decision that it's the best thing for us to do at that time, right?
Mhm.
The day that I decide that it's not, I get rid of it. That's the way that I've always done. I used to have Adobe services. I would pay it monthly. I noticed after 3 months I stopped using it. I just cut it. One of the best things that's helped me 100%. It's amazing feature. I don't know what bank you guys are with, but I'm with TD. They have an app on their phone that will tell you your daily spend, but it tells you the day after. So every single morning, I get a notification of what I spent. And I'm not even kidding you. Like, there's like at least like once or twice a month, I'm like, what the hell did I buy yesterday? Like, what is that? Why is that number so much higher? I go in and it reviews what I sent. Because sometimes we have annual subscriptions that just get charged to your credit card automatically that you aren't aware of. I would go in and I would see it and I go, oh my gosh. Yeah.
A lot of smiles coming from the Silvernagels on this call so far.
So
Relating highly to what Mike is saying right now.
Yeah, just by doing that, you fully understand where your money's going every single day, right? And as another part of the app, it shows you your yearly spend on a monthly basis. So now my goal has been, okay, how do we minimize? And again, without thinking about like taking away opportunity, how do we minimize our spend this month in comparison to last year? How do we beat that? What did we spend money on last year? Do we have to spend money on that this year? Do we have to make an investment? Whatever it is that we're doing, you weigh it out.
Yeah.
And that's been me personally. Like I'm very profit driven, very much focused on the net, because again, at the end of the day, that's what you're walking home with, right? And if I'm going to show up if I'm going to provide the best service to my clients, I need to net the most amount in order to keep providing for them, if that makes sense in a weird way. I don't know. But
No, it makes perfect sense. And I think it's interesting because Mike, you've almost like gamified it, right? Like you've made it almost like fun for you in a way. And I know you enjoy it anyway because you're like you like that stuff. But it is funny, like when you talk about it, it is a challenge. Like, how do I beat myself? How do I do better? How do I do better than last month and last year? And for people that are competitive, that's a great way to look at it. You know, and get yourself set up so that you want to look at it every month, and you don't have to check it every day by any means, but it's a good habit. And if there's tools out there that'll do it for you, why not, right? It'll help you tremendously. But the key thing, I think what I was trying to say before when it cut out was like when we know that all of Mike has that money in his database, it allows us to make different decisions, right? That whereas before my decision might have been I need to go invest in more leads or more time lead genning. I can look at that now and go, okay, my lead genning is working. I need to actually spend more time on conversion. So now what does that look like? Is that a time investment? Is that a money investment? Is that, a team commitment that we have to sit down and reassess and make a better, more educated decision from that place, right? When we don't know any of that information, we're not making educated decisions. We're guessing and we're hoping it works out. And for those of us that are lucky enough, it does most of the time. And so you kind of don't really feel like you've got a problem. You're like, everything's great. I got money. We're flying. But how much are you leaving behind or spending that you don't need to be spending? Like, could you have more? Could you do more with the money you're spending? It's not even about like bigger profit margins. It's about like, how effective are you being with your money, right?
Yeah, totally agree. I love it.
Mm-hmm. So before we take off, I'd love if we just went around the table and share what's one practical thing that you're either doing or have learned in the past that would help somebody manage their budget in their business today. They could leave this call and be like, I can implement that and I'll see a difference.
For me, 100% your P&L. So profit and loss. So every single month, you should know exactly how much money you've spent and how much money you've made. And if there's more money spent than made, you need to review, right? You got to go through those numbers. That's like number one to me. And also just you're checking your credit card statements. Not a lot of people do that. Go through it. Make sure the money that you're spending is going to the right places. Who knows?
Accurate
right?
Too.
It's one of those things that you gotta review that stuff. So last thing before I cut off here is cut out all unnecessary expenses. That's the biggest thing too.
One answer, Mike. One answer.
Yeah, one answer. We
Yeah,
save enough for the rest of us, bud.
No,
Just full of our
I'm so passionate about this topic.
Mel, what about you?
I would say focus on the expenses first, and CRONC, the acronym KRONC, which is every month. And I would go back 3 months because some of your subscriptions come out quarterly. Go back 3 months and look at every single expense, not just in your business, but personally, right? Are you going to keep it? Can you replace it? Or can you offset it with an O? Like, is there a way for you? Maybe your advertising can be spent or shared with a mortgage broker, right? What's the other one? And negotiate, like Mike did with his go in and renegotiate absolutely everything. All they're going to do is say no. Who cares, right? Negotiate, and then C is cancel, right? Or cancel it. And you should do this every we've done it once. I mean, we've done it more than that, but when we did it the first time, we were like, okay, that's set. And then up again came another expense that wasn't billed until it was biannually. And it's like, wait a minute. So if we weren't doing it every month, we wouldn't see it. So I would say personal and business, and do it every month.
I think for me, it's Mike took one of my answers, but I'll repeat it.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. It's a good answer. Check your credit card statements. Like, I do it on a regular basis. I check our credit cards, and it's funny because Dylan won't know I'm doing it. And then all of a sudden I'll just randomly be like, hey, what's this? And why did we spend X amount of money? And then he'll be like, oh, I got this, or that was that, or this was for the kids. I'm like, okay, cool. And that question only ever happens when I'm looking at our credit card statement. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. And then I'll ask, and usually like it's a pretty solid answer. I'm like, okay, cool. And then sometimes I'm like, why are we paying for that? But mostly it's solid. And I found that habit at the very least is something you can implement immediately. You can open up your phone and look at your credit card statement right now. But on a bigger scale, get a bookkeeper. Honestly, they're not that expensive. And you give them your receipts and your stuff every month, and they organize it. They build out your P&L. So for everybody that like is hating this conversation because the idea of doing this is overwhelming and horrifying and terrible, you're never going to do it. So do yourself a favor and go invest in somebody who has a system. It won't cost you a lot. You will make more in the savings than it will cost you to pay the person to do that bookkeeping.
Yeah.
So
mine's $300 a month to get an idea. That's how much I pay my bookkeeper. Best $300.
Sorry, Mike, how much was it?
$300 a month is what I pay.
Nice. Beautiful.
Yeah. The best money I've spent.
Yeah, and that's worth it every time, because there's a good chance you will save more than that by having organized finances, right? So I would say easiest, check your credit cards and implement bookkeeper. Mel, you look like you're going to say something there.
I was just going to say, at the very least, if someone hears $300 a month and they're like, oh my God, forget it. Track yourself. Like, track what you're spending. We're too easy with the debit card, or even it's worse. You know, listen, I'm a scammer. Well, I don't mean that. Wait a minute.
What?
Like, I am able to find my way around anything, right? That's what I mean. So yeah, that was great. Okay. The year's going to get worse now.
I was wondering why you wanted my credit card information earlier. Never mind.
We get a sound clip from Mel. I'm a scammer. I'm a scammer.
Yeah.
I'm a scammer.
I'm a scammer. Oh my God. But if you do the trick of, okay, I'm going to take out $600 for this week or this month or whatever, and this is what I'm going to spend. But if you're not tracking that, then it's even worse. All you see is a withdrawal for $600. Like, track. Even if you're going to do nothing with it. Even if you say, okay, this is baloney, I'm not going to use anything, but okay, I'll track. Do it. Just do it, because it's phenomenal. You guys know, like, when we talk with young people about buying houses, and one of the things we do is we go through their credit card statements and their debit statements, and they are supporting Starbucks and Tim Hortons. Like, that's why those companies exist, but they don't realize it. They're like, oh, I spend like one coffee a day. Okay, that's $250 a month.
Yeah. I love it. All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed our conversation for the day. It's not an easy one to have, but I think it was great that we had it, and we showed vulnerability on both sides, and we kind of went into some great tricks there. So I know that if you paid attention, you can definitely take away a few things from this call that you can implement. So thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week. And as Mel is showing on the video version right now, she's holding up the book Shift by Gary Keller. Highly recommend you check this book out if you haven't heard of it or read it before. That's Shift by Gary Keller. It is fantastic. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.